My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 63 years old, and after decades of serving as a Navy nurse, I thought I had finally learned how to read the signs of life and death. Yet nothing prepared me for that night flight to Florida. I sat by the window, the hum of the engines mixing with the restless pulse in my chest. In my hand, I held my father's pocket watch, the same one I carried through every deployment, its ticking steady against my palm. I told myself I was simply going to surprise my son, Michael. But beneath that thought lived a sharper truth. I was afraid of what I might find. When the plane touched down in Tampa before dawn, the air was heavy and wet, clinging to my skin like a warning. The cab ride toward his neighborhood felt endless. Palm trees blurred past the glass streetlights, casting yellow halos on the empty highway. I pictured Michael's smile, the way he used to laugh as a boy when he ran across the beach with sand stuck to his knees. That memory kept me steady until the driver slowed and pulled onto his street. The sight that greeted me stole the air from my lungs. His yard was wild grass, knee-high, as if no one had cared for it in weeks. The mailbox bulged with envelopes, some slipping out onto the ground. Curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the morning light. It didn't look like my son's home. It looked abandoned. I climbed from the cab, the Florida heat pressing down like a hand on the back of my neck, and walked to the porch. My knuckles hovered near the door when a voice broke across the stillness. Mrs. Carter. It was Mr. Jenkins, the neighbor from across the street, holding a garden hose with trembling hands. He hurried toward me, his face pale. "You don't know, do you?" My grip on the watch tightened. He swallowed hard. "Michael's been in the ICU for 2 weeks now. They took him in the middle of the night. And his wife, Sabrina, she's down in the Keys, posting pictures from a yacht like nothing's wrong." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. My son was fighting for his life while the woman he trusted most was raising a glass over turquoise waters. The sliding glass doors of Tampa General hissed open, and a wave of disinfectant hit me so hard it burned my throat. I gave Michael's name at the reception desk, and the nurse's eyes flickered the way people look at you when they know something you don't want to hear. She told me ICU 5th floor, room 514. My legs carried me forward, but every step felt heavier, as if I were marching into a battle I had already lost. The elevator doors closed, and I saw my reflection in the stainless steel. My face was older, sharper than I remembered, carved by years of discipline and grief. I pressed my hand against the pocket watch in my jacket, willing the metal to steady me. When the elevator chimed, the hallway stretched quiet and sterile, the beeping of monitors echoing like faint heartbeats. I pushed open the door. My son lay small against the white sheets tubes, tracing over his body like cruel vines. His skin was pale, lips cracked, chest rising in shallow, stubborn pulls. A doctor turned from the monitor and lowered his voice. "I'm Dr. Aaron Mills. Your son's cancer was advanced when we found it. If we'd caught it earlier, there might have been more time." Time. The word hit me like a stone. I moved closer, wrapped my fingers around Michael's hand. His skin was cold, fragile as glass. Then his eyelids fluttered and hazel eyes met mine. "I love you, Mom," he whispered, a thread of breath. Before I could answer, the monitor's steady beep flattened into one long tone. Nurses rushed in, pushing me back into the hall as their voices rose sharp and urgent. Moments later, silence. The door opened. Dr. Mills shook his head, and I knew I had come home too late. The drive back to Michael's house felt endless, though the hospital was only a few miles away. I kept both hands tight on the wheel of the rental car, trying to ignore the smell of antiseptic that still clung to my clothes. When I pulled into his driveway, the sight of the unkempt lawn and overflowing mailbox cut sharper than before. It no longer looked neglected. It looked betrayed. Inside, the air was stale, heavy, with weeks of stillness. I flicked on the light, and shadows pulled back to reveal a living room frozen in time. An empty glass sat on the coffee table, a thin crust around the rim. On the counter, stacks of unopened envelopes leaned against the wall, some marked with red lettering, "Final Notice." I forced myself to the small office at the back of the house. Michael's chair sat slightly askew as if he'd left in a hurry and never returned. Papers littered the desk. I began sorting through them, my hands trembling. At first, I saw overdue mortgage statements, credit card warnings, utility shutoff slips. Then came the receipts, thick glossy slips that didn't belong in Michael's world. A yacht rental in Key Largo, $150,000. A jewelry store in Miami, nearly $200,000. Luxury resorts, oceanfront dinners, high-end boutiques. My chest tightened as I scanned the dates. Every single charge had been made in the last 2 weeks, the same 2 weeks my son lay in a hospital bed fighting for his life. I dropped the receipts onto the desk, the paper trembling in my hands. The image of Sabrina's smile in those yacht photos flashed before me. My son had trusted her to stand beside him, and she had drained him dry instead. I knew then this wasn't just neglect, it was betrayal. I sat in Michael's dim office with the receipts spread across the desk like silent witnesses. My phone lay in my palm, her number still saved, though I hadn't used it in months. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a long moment, I hesitated, the weight of what I'd just discovered pressing against me. Then I pressed call. The line connected almost instantly. Sabrina's face filled the screen, framed by the blinding white of a yacht deck. Music thumped in the background, mingled with bursts of laughter. She held a stemmed glass, some neon-colored drink, sloshing dangerously near the rim. Behind her, men and women in swimwear danced and shouted over the wind. Well, well, she drawled, tilting her sunglasses down just enough to show her eyes. Look who finally decided to call. You should have joined us. The weather down here is perfect. I forced my voice to stay level. Michael's gone. For the briefest second, her smile faltered. Then she shrugged and took a slow sip. It was inevitable. You know he'd been sick for a while. Nothing anyone could do. My grip on the phone tightened, and the charges, the yacht, the jewelry, the resorts, all while he lay in the ICU. Her laugh was short, careless. I'm his wife. What's his is mine. That's how marriage works, Evelyn. The ease with which she said it was almost more shocking than the words themselves. She didn't even attempt remorse. I studied her face, the designer sunglasses, the shimmer of gold hoops, the wind tangling her styled hair, and memorized every detail. Enjoy the view, I said quietly. She tilted her head as if she'd heard a compliment, but before she could answer, I ended the call. The screen went dark, leaving only my reflection. My anger steadied into resolve. By morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper. I gathered the receipts into a folder, slipped Michael's notarized power of attorney into my bag, and set out for Tampa. The highway blurred past the steady hum of the car, matching the rhythm of my resolve. I knew exactly who I needed to see. Robert Hayes had been my commanding officer back when I was a young Navy nurse. After retiring, he moved into financial administration for veterans, the kind of position where calls got answered and paperwork moved quickly. If anyone could help me cut off Sabrina before she drained the last of Michael's legacy, it was Robert. His office smelled of old wood and strong coffee, a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. When he stepped from behind his desk, his smile was warm but cautious. Evelyn Carter, he said, clasping my hand firmly. It's been years, and I can tell you're not here for a social visit. I placed the folder on his desk, opening it to the yacht rental. These were charged to Michael's accounts while he was in the ICU. And here's the power of attorney he signed before my last deployment. I need everything frozen, every account, every card today. Robert flipped through the pages, his brow tightening with each receipt. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. Instead, he picked up the phone. For the next 40 minutes, the room filled with the tapping of keys and the low murmur of official calls. I watched each step like it was a field operation. Finally, Robert slid a printout across the desk. All accounts frozen, linked cards canceled, remaining balances moved to a holding account in your name. I exhaled the first full breath I'd taken since the hospital. Then my phone buzzed, Sabrina's name flashing across the screen. The calls began before I even left Robert's parking lot. At first, her voice came through sharp, spitting curses that made the phone vibrate in my hand. "You can't do this to me, Evelyn. You're nothing but an old woman meddling in business you don't understand." By the third voicemail, her tone had shifted, syrupy and false. "Please just unlock one card. I only need to cover some expenses. We can work this out." Not once did she say Michael's name. I silenced the phone and drove back to the house. The rooms felt heavier than before, as though the walls themselves carried the weight of what Michael had endured. I returned to the study, determined to keep searching. In the bottom drawer of his desk, tucked beneath a stack of manuals, I found a small leather notebook. Its cover was worn, the spine creased from use. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first pages were mundane lists of groceries, reminders to pay bills. Then the entries shifted. Dates, amounts, short notes written in Michael's careful hand. March 8th, $3,000 medicine for Sabrina. April 12th, $5,500 roof repairs. May 3rd, $7,000 car payment. I flipped through page after page, my chest tightening. The sums grew larger, always tied to Sabrina's needs. But when I cross-checked the entries with the bank statements I'd pulled from the unopened mail, the truth hit me cold. The medicine was a luxury spa in Palm Beach. The roof repairs a designer boutique. The car payment, a down payment on a gold watch. I gripped the notebook as if it might burn me. Michael had trusted her completely, believing every word, and she had turned his love into her spending account. The betrayal was no longer just numbers on paper. It was carved into his final months. I carried the notebook into the living room and sat heavily on the couch. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the blinds, striping the floor with pale gold. My hands shook as I reached for Michael's phone, the one the hospital had returned to me in a plastic evidence bag. Most of the recent messages had been deleted, the threads eerily empty. But buried in an archived folder, one conversation remained. It was a message from Sabrina to a friend. "Might as well enjoy his money, he won't last long." The words froze me in place. My throat went dry as I read them again, each letter. A knife. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't even greed alone. It was cruelty calculated casual and typed out with the confidence of someone who thought no one would ever see it. I closed the phone slowly, my palms slick with sweat. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the house creaking around me as if Michael's absence had become its own presence. The grief was there, yes, but beneath it, something else rose, a steady, simmering resolve. This was no longer about money. It was about justice. I pulled a folder from the desk and began sliding in every piece of evidence I had: the yacht receipts, the jewelry invoices, the credit card statements, the notebook with Michael's handwriting, and now the phone with its damning message. Each document felt like another brick in the case I would build each page a voice Michael no longer had. By the time night fell, the folder was thick in my hands. I stood at the window, looking out at the dark street, and whispered to the silence, "She will not walk away from this." The decision was made. The next battle would be fought in court. The courthouse in downtown Tampa was cool, despite the August heat outside. Its marble floors echoed with each step as I followed my attorney Marcos Rivera into the chamber. My folder of evidence felt like armor clutched against my chest. Across the aisle, Sabrina sat with her lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit, who whispered into her ear. She wore a tailored blazer, gold hoops glinting under the fluorescent lights, her expression smug, as if this was just another game. When the judge entered the room, rose, then settled into silence. Marcos began calmly laying out the timeline: Michael's diagnosis, his admission to the ICU, the absence of visitors, the flood of luxury charges during those same 2 weeks. He moved methodically like a surgeon exposing rot beneath the skin. The receipts appeared on the large screen one by one: yacht rentals, jewelry, invoices, resort bills. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Still, Sabrina sat straight, eyes fixed ahead, lips pressed into a faint smile. Then Marcos displayed the text message: "Might as well enjoy his money. He won't last long." The room shifted. Gasps broke out. Even the judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. I felt the air leave my lungs, not from shock, I had already seen it, but from the power of those words, now exposed to the world. Sabrina's lawyer scrambled to object, claiming spousal rights and marital property, his tone smooth but brittle. But the damage was done. I watched Sabrina's jaw tighten, her fingers clutching the edge of the table. For the first time, her confidence cracked. When Dr. Aaron Mills's recorded testimony played explaining that, with proper care, Michael could have lived another year or two, the silence in the chamber was absolute. I folded my hands in my lap. The evidence was no longer mine alone to carry. It belonged to the truth. The judge leaned forward, his eyes moving from the pile of evidence on the bench to Sabrina, then back to me. The chamber was silent, every breath held in waiting. His voice, when it came, was measured but firm. Given the clear documentation of financial misuse, the abandonment of the decedent during critical illness, and the credible medical testimony presented, this court orders all assets of Michael Carter frozen. Temporary control of the estate is granted to his mother, Evelyn Carter. Sabrina Carter is prohibited from accessing any property or funds until further order. The gavel struck once sharp and final. Across the aisle, Sabrina shot to her feet. "You can't do this!" Her voice cracked through the chamber, high and furious. "You'll regret it, Evelyn. This isn't over." Two bailiffs moved quickly, placing firm hands on her arms as she twisted and shouted. The smug composure she had worn like a mask shattered, revealing nothing but raw, desperate rage. I stayed seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap, my face calm. Inside, though, I felt the weight of months lift, as if the evidence itself had been pressing against my chest. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but all I heard was the echo of Michael's voice in the ICU. "I love you, Mom." As the bailiffs guided Sabrina toward the exit, her glare burned across the room, promising retaliation. I didn't flinch. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I felt steady on my feet. When the judge adjourned, Marcos touched my shoulder gently. "You did right," he said. I nodded, though my voice wouldn't come. Justice had been served, yes, but justice couldn't bring my son back. And I knew my fight wasn't truly over. The house was unbearably quiet after the trial. I spent mornings at Michael's kitchen table, sunlight spilling across stacks of estate paperwork. Each envelope I opened, each balance I tallied, felt like reducing his life to numbers on a page. Money he had earned with years of work, hours of sweat now sitting in sterile accounts. I stared at the printouts and thought, if it only stays here, then all of this, his pain, his struggle, was for nothing. One evening, as the sun lowered over the Gulf, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat with my notebook. The silence pressed in on me, thick as the Florida heat. That was when the thought came, I couldn't let Michael's legacy end with locked accounts and court orders. It had to breathe, to touch lives the way his had touched mine. The next morning, I called Tampa General and asked to speak with the social worker who handled cancer patients with no family support. Within days, we began drafting the papers for a nonprofit, the Michael Foundation. Its mission would be simple but vital to provide financial and emotional support for cancer patients abandoned in their hardest hours. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Soon the first transfers were in place. Sitting in the bank office, signing my name, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was movement, a step towards something beyond grief. That afternoon, I visited the hospital again. This time, not as a mother searching for her son, but as someone ready to carry forward what he left behind. I didn't know who I would meet, only that I was finally walking toward purpose instead of away from loss. His name was Ethan. 9 years old, thin as a reed, his head covered by a faded baseball cap. A nurse led me to his room where he sat propped up against white pillows, holding a sketchbook in his lap. He looked up when I entered, his eyes, tired but clear. I introduced myself softly, telling him about the foundation we'd started in Michael's name. He listened quietly, then said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I just want someone to stay." The words landed like an echo of my son's final breath. My throat tightened, but I managed to smile and reach for his small hand. "I'm here now," I told him, and I meant it. Weeks later, with the doctor's support, Ethan moved into the house. The first weekend, we painted the spare room together. He chose a bright blue, saying it reminded him of the sky on days he used to run outside before the hospital stays. His brushstrokes were clumsy streaks zigzagging across the wall, but I left them. It was his mark, his claim on a space that was finally his own. The garden, once neglected, came alive again. We planted tomatoes and marigolds, his laughter carrying across the yard, chasing away the silence that had haunted the house. Evenings found us in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, experimenting with recipes. Sometimes he hummed tunes I hadn't heard since Michael was a boy, and the sound was both comfort and ache. One evening, we walked down to Clearwater Beach, carrying a framed photo of Michael. We set it gently in the sand, weighed down by a smooth stone Ethan had picked from the garden. The tide reached just close enough to kiss the frame without pulling it away. Ethan slipped his hand into mine. The horizon glowed pink and gold. And for the first time since stepping off that plane, I felt we were building something neither of us would ever have to lose. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.